Some nights don't fade into memory. They stay with you because they changed everything. I knew that long before I was ready to admit it. Long before I had the courage to face what that night with Ethan Walker really meant. Because no matter how many times I tried to tell myself it was just a mistake, just alcohol, just a moment we both lost control, the truth was simple. We had crossed a line we could never uncross. Graduation night felt like something out of a dream. Warm summer air, music echoing across campus, people celebrating their future while I stood there watching mine quietly fall apart. And at the center of it all was Ethan, the alpha everyone admired. Confident, rich, untouchable, the kind of man who didn't have to try to be noticed, because the world already revolved around him. "Liam, you look like you're about to disappear," he said when he found me standing alone. His voice teasing, but his eyes sharper than usual, like he actually cared. And that was always my weakness when it came to him. The way he made it seem like I mattered just enough to keep me hoping for something more. We drank together that night. More than we should have. Laughing about nothing. Talking about everything we were about to leave behind. And somewhere between one glass and the next, the distance I had spent years building between us started to crumble. "Why have you been avoiding me?" he asked suddenly. His voice lower now. More serious. And I felt my heartbeat spike because I didn't have an answer I could say out loud. Not without exposing everything. "I haven't," I said quietly. But even I could hear the lie in my own voice. What happened after that wasn't planned. It wasn't something we talked about or decided. It was just a moment that spiraled into something real. Something undeniable. And I remember the way he held on to me like I was the only thing grounding him. The way everything else faded until it was just us. No expectations. No roles. No alpha and omega. Just two people who had been holding back for far too long. For a brief, dangerous moment, I let myself believe it meant something. But morning always comes. And with it, reality. I woke up first. The weight of what had happened settling over me all at once. And when Ethan finally stirred, he looked at me with confusion, not recognition. "Hey, did we just pass out here?" he asked. His voice casual, like the night before hadn't happened at all. And my chest tightened so hard it almost hurt to breathe. I stared at him for a second too long before forcing a small, steady nod. "Yeah, we just drank too much." And just like that, the truth was buried, erased with a single lie. A few days later, I heard it. Not from Ethan. Never from him. But from the people around us. Whispered like it was exciting news. Like it didn't have the power to destroy me. "Did you hear? Ethan's getting engaged," one of our friends said, scrolling through their phone. "Some family arrangement. But she's gorgeous. They look perfect together." And I just stood there, smiling like it didn't matter. Like I hadn't just given him something I could never take back. I didn't ask him if it was true. Didn't confront him. Didn't give myself the chance to hear the answer from his own mouth. Because deep down, I already believed it. Already accepted that someone like Ethan was never meant to stay with someone like me. So I did the only thing I knew how to do. I stepped back. Quietly. Completely. Disappearing from his life before he could even realize I was gone. Because loving Ethan had always meant knowing when to let him go, even if it broke me. 2 months after I left, my world ended in the quietest way possible, with 2 faint pink lines that refused to disappear no matter how long I stared at them. I remember standing in the tiny bathroom of my apartment, the kind of place you rented when you did not plan to stay long, gripping the edge of the sink so hard my fingers turned white. "No, this can't be right," I whispered, shaking my head as if denial alone could undo reality. But it did not. The test sat there, unforgiving, undeniable. Pregnant. The word echoed in my mind like a sentence I had no way to escape. My first instinct was panic, sharp and suffocating. My second was something far worse, his face. Ethan. The way he had looked at me that night, like I mattered. The way he had looked at me the next morning, like I was nothing more than a blank space in his memory. "He does not even remember you," I told myself out loud, my voice trembling. "You cannot tell him. You cannot ruin his life with something he never chose." I slid down against the wall, pulling my knees to my chest, trying to breathe through the storm building inside me. I thought about calling someone, anyone, but there was no one I trusted with this. My family would not understand. Society would not forgive it. An omega carrying a child alone, without a bond, without an alpha beside him, was not just judged, it was erased. And I refused to let that happen to my child. That night, I made the decision that would define everything that came after. I packed a single suitcase, booked the first flight I could afford, and disappeared. No goodbye, no explanation. Just gone. The airport felt unreal, like I was watching someone else live my life. When the woman at the check-in counter smiled and asked, "Business or personal travel?" I hesitated for half a second before answering, "Personal." It felt like a lie and the truth at the same time. The flight was long, nearly 8 hours, but I did not sleep. I sat there, one hand resting unconsciously over my stomach, trying to process what I had done, what I was about to do. "I will protect you," I whispered under my breath, my voice so quiet no one else could hear it, even if I have to do it alone. The months that followed were the hardest of my life. Every doctor appointment, every moment of exhaustion, every quiet night filled with uncertainty. I faced it all without him. There were days I wanted to give up, days I questioned everything, but then I would feel that small, steady reminder that I was not alone anymore. And somehow, that was enough to keep going. When the time finally came, it was not dramatic or loud. It was quiet, overwhelming, and real in a way nothing else had ever been. And then, just like that, he was there. My son, tiny, fragile, and impossibly warm in my arms. I stared down at him, my vision blurred with tears I had been holding back for months. "Hi," I whispered, my voice breaking. "I am your dad." He shifted slightly, his small fingers curling instinctively, and in that moment, something inside me settled for the first time since that night. I was not just Liam anymore. I was someone's entire world. "Lewis," I said softly, testing the name I had chosen so many times in my head. "Your name is Lewis." He blinked up at me, his eyes still unfocused, but there was something there, something that made my heart ache in a way I could not explain. Because even then, I could see it. A reflection of someone I had tried so hard to forget. "It is just us now," I murmured, holding him closer. "And I promise, I will never let you feel like you were a mistake. Even if the world believed that, I never would." 3 years passed, and I learned how to build a life out of silence, routine, and carefully constructed lies that kept the truth buried where no one could find it. Every morning started the same way, long before the sun came up, when the world was still quiet enough for me to pretend that everything was simple. I would wake up to the soft sound of Lewis breathing beside me, his small hand curled into the fabric of my shirt like he was afraid I might disappear. "I am here," I would whisper, brushing his hair back gently. "I am not going anywhere." It became a promise I repeated so often that it felt like part of who I was. Our apartment was small, barely enough space for the two of us, but it was warm, and more importantly, it was ours. I worked 2 jobs to keep it that way, one during the day at a local bakery and another in the evenings doing freelance design work from home. It was exhausting, but I never let myself complain. I could not afford to. Lewis deserved stability, even if it came at the cost of my own rest. "Daddy, are you tired?" he asked me one night, his voice small and concerned as he sat at the kitchen table coloring with his favorite crayons. I paused, forcing a smile as I looked over at him. "No," I said softly. "I am just thinking." He tilted his head, studying me in a way that felt far too perceptive for a child his age. "You think a lot," he said. I laughed quietly, though it did not quite reach my eyes. "Yeah," I admitted. "I do." The truth was, I thought about the past more than I wanted to admit. It lived in the quiet spaces of my life, in the moments when I let my guard down for even a second, especially when I looked at Lewis. Because no matter how much I tried to move forward, there was one thing I could never escape. He looked like Ethan. It was in the shape of his eyes, the way they caught the light just right. It was in the way he frowned when he was concentrating, so serious and focused that it made my chest ache. Sometimes, it felt like I was seeing a reflection of a life I had left behind, staring back at me through the face of the child I loved more than anything. "Daddy," Lewis called, breaking me out of my thoughts. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course," I said, sitting down beside him. He hesitated for a moment, his small fingers gripping the crayon a little tighter. "Where is my mom?" The question hit harder than I expected, even though I had known this day would come. I took a slow breath, steadying myself before answering. "Your mom." I began carefully, choosing my words the way I always did. "She is not here anymore." Lewis frowned, his brows knitting together. "Did she leave?" I swallowed, forcing myself to nod. "Yeah," I said quietly. "She had to go away." He was silent for a moment, processing it in that simple, honest way children do. Then he looked up at me again, his expression softening. "That is okay," he said. "I have you." Something in my chest tightened so sharply it almost hurt. I pulled him into a hug, holding him closer than I probably should have. "Yeah," I whispered against his hair. "You have me." And that was the truth I held on to every single day. No matter how complicated everything else was, no matter how much I had to hide, one thing was certain. I would do whatever it took to protect him, even if it meant carrying the past alone for the rest of my life. Even if it meant never looking back. The day everything started to fall apart again was supposed to be just another normal morning, the kind I had spent 3 years perfecting down to. The smallest detail. I was standing outside the preschool gates, holding Lewis's hand as he bounced slightly on his toes, his backpack almost too big for his small frame. "Daddy, will you pick me up early today?" he asked, looking up at me with those familiar eyes that made my heart ache every single time. I smiled, crouching down to fix the strap on his shoulder. "I will be right on time," I promised. "Just like always." He nodded seriously, as if this was the most important agreement in the world. "Okay, you cannot be late." "I will not," I said softly. For a moment, everything felt calm. Safe. Then I felt it. That shift in the air, subtle but unmistakable, like the world itself had paused for a second. My body reacted before my mind could catch up, every instinct tightening, every sense sharpening in a way I had not experienced in years. Alpha presence. Strong. Familiar. No. My grip on Lewis's hand tightened unconsciously. "Daddy?" he asked, confused. I forced myself to relax, taking a slow breath. "It is nothing," I said, though my voice came out quieter than I intended. I told myself I was imagining it, that it was just my mind playing tricks on me, dragging me back to a past I had worked so hard to escape. But then I heard his voice. "Excuse me, is this the entrance for the kindergarten program?" The sound hit me like a memory I had tried to forget, but never truly could. I froze. Slowly, against every instinct telling me to run, I turned. And there he was. Ethan Walker stood just a few feet away, dressed in a tailored coat that spoke of quiet authority, his presence commanding even in something as ordinary as a school entrance. He looked older, sharper, more composed than I remembered, but it was still him. It had always been him. For a second, the world around me blurred. 3 years disappeared like they had never existed, and I was back in that moment, standing too close to him, feeling something I had no right to feel. "Daddy." Lewis's voice pulled me back, grounding me just enough to keep standing. I swallowed hard, forcing my expression into something neutral, something safe. "Do not let him see anything. Do not let him recognize you." Ethan's gaze shifted, and then it landed on Lewis. Everything changed. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but I saw it. The way his eyes narrowed slightly, not in suspicion, but in something deeper. Recognition without understanding. His attention lingered longer than it should have. Too long. My heart started pounding. "We should go," I said quickly, gently guiding Lewis toward the entrance. But Lewis, curious as always, looked back. "Hi," he said brightly, waving his small hand. "Are you new here?" I froze. Ethan's expression softened slightly, something rare and unguarded flickering across his face as he looked down at my son. "Yeah," he replied, his voice quieter now. "You could say that." Lewis smiled, completely unaware of the tension wrapping around us. "I am Lewis," he said proudly. Ethan repeated the name under his breath, like he was testing how it felt. "Lewis." Then his eyes flicked up, meeting mine for the first time. And everything inside me stopped. There was no recognition. Not of me. Not of what we had been. But there was something else. Something that made my chest tighten with fear. Interest. "And you are?" he asked. I forced myself to breathe, to stay calm, even as every instinct screamed at me to run as far as possible. "Just his father," I said quietly. For a moment, neither of us moved. Then Lewis tugged on my hand again. "Daddy, I am going to be late," he whispered urgently. "Right," I said, breaking eye contact immediately. "Go on." I watched as Lewis ran inside, laughing, carefree, untouched by the storm that had just begun. When I turned back, Ethan was still looking at me. Not confused. Not distant. Focused. Like he was trying to solve something he could not quite see yet. And in that moment, I understood something with terrifying clarity. This was not over. Not even close. After that morning, I told myself it was just a coincidence. That seeing him once did not mean anything. That I could go back to the life I had carefully built and pretend nothing had changed. But deep down I knew the truth the moment I saw the way he looked at Lewis. It started small, almost harmless at first. The next day, when I arrived at the preschool, he was there again. Standing near the entrance, his posture relaxed, but his presence impossible to ignore. My steps faltered for just a second before I Forced myself forward. Stay calm, I whispered under my breath. Just drop Lewis off and leave. But Lewis noticed him immediately. Daddy, it is him again, he said excitedly, tugging on my hand. I felt my chest tighten. Do not stare, I said gently, though my voice carried more tension than I intended. Too late. Lewis had already waved. Hi, he called out, smiling brightly. Ethan's attention shifted instantly, like he had been waiting for that moment. Good morning, he replied, his tone softer than I expected. Then his eyes lifted to me again, and that same focused look returned. Not random, not casual, intentional. You come here every day? He asked. The question sounded simple, but there was something beneath it, something probing. I nodded briefly. Yes. I see, he said, as if filing the information away. There was a pause, and then Lewis spoke again, completely unaware of the tension. Are you picking someone up too? Ethan's gaze flickered back to him, and for a moment, something almost warm appeared in his expression. Something like that, he said. I could not take it anymore. Lewis, you are going to be late, I said quickly, guiding him toward the door. Say goodbye. Bye, Lewis chirped, running inside without another thought. I turned immediately, ready to leave, but Ethan stepped slightly closer, not enough to block me, just enough to make it impossible to ignore him. You seem nervous around me, he said quietly. My heart skipped. I am not, I replied a little too fast. His eyes narrowed slightly, not in suspicion, but in curiosity. Then why do you keep avoiding me? I did not answer. Because I could not. Because the truth would destroy everything. Over the next week, it became a pattern. He was there in the mornings. Sometimes in the afternoons. Always at just the right distance. Never crossing a line, but never leaving either. Watching. Observing. Learning. And Lewis. Lewis liked him. That was the worst part. He is nice, Lewis said one evening as we walked home, swinging his small hand in mine. The tall guy? He listens when I talk. I forced a smile. You should not talk to strangers too much, I said gently. He is not a stranger, Lewis insisted. He knows my name. My chest tightened painfully. That does not mean you know him, I replied, my voice softer now. Lewis frowned, thinking about it, but then shrugged. I still think he is nice. I said nothing, because I could not explain the kind of danger Ethan represented. Not to Lewis. Not without exposing everything. But it was not just Lewis who was changing. Ethan was too. I could see it in the way his questions became more direct, the way his gaze lingered longer, sharper, like he was piecing something together one detail at a time. One afternoon, as I arrived to pick Lewis up, he was already there, leaning casually against his car. Waiting. For us. We need to talk, he said as soon as I approached. My stomach dropped. There is nothing to talk about, I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. He did not move. There is, he said quietly. Because something about this does not make sense. My pulse started racing. What are you talking about? He looked past me, toward the school doors, where Lewis would appear any second. Then his gaze returned to me, intense and unwavering. That kid, he said slowly. Why does he feel familiar? Everything inside me froze. Because I knew exactly what he meant. And I knew this was only the beginning. I knew the moment Ethan said those words that everything I had tried to protect was already slipping through my fingers. That kid, why does he feel familiar? The question echoed in my mind long after I walked away, my grip tightening around Lewis's hand as we left the school that day. Daddy, you are squeezing too hard, Lewis said softly, wincing slightly. I immediately loosened my hold, forcing myself to breathe. I am sorry, I murmured, kneeling down in front of him. Did I hurt you? He shook his head, studying my face with quiet concern. You look scared, he said. I froze for a second before forcing a smile. I am not scared, I said gently. I am just tired. It was a lie, and I hated how easily it came out. Because the truth was, I was terrified, not of Ethan himself, but of what he was starting to see. The small details. The things I could not hide forever. Over the next few days, his presence did not fade. It grew. He stopped pretending our meetings were accidental. He started asking questions. Careful ones at first. How old is your son? Does he go here full time? Do you live nearby? I answered as little as possible, keeping my responses short, neutral, distant. But it did not stop him. If anything, it made him more certain that something was wrong. One afternoon, when I arrived earlier than usual, I saw something that made my stomach drop. Ethan was crouched down in front of Lewis near the playground fence, holding out a small juice box. You have to poke it here, he was saying, his voice calm, patient. Lewis laughed as he tried again, missing the straw hole completely. It is hard, he said. Ethan smiled faintly, guiding his hand. Try again. I stood frozen, watching them from a distance. The way Ethan's posture softened. The way Lewis looked up at him without fear, without hesitation. It felt natural. Too natural. Lewis. I called out sharply. Both of them turned at the same time. And for a split second, the resemblance hit me so hard it stole the air from my lungs. Ethan stood slowly, his gaze locking onto mine. You came early, he said. I walked over quickly, my heart pounding. We need to go, I said, taking Lewis's hand. Now. But Daddy, I am still playing, Lewis protested. Now, I repeated more firmly. He looked up at me, surprised, but did not argue. As we turned to leave, Ethan's voice stopped me. You cannot keep avoiding this. I did not turn around. There is nothing to avoid. Then look at me and say that, he said. I hesitated. That was my mistake. Because when I finally turned, I saw it clearly in his expression. He was not guessing anymore. He was certain. I ran a test, he said quietly. My blood ran cold. What are you talking about? My voice barely sounded like mine. He reached into his coat, pulling out a folded document, his hand steady in a way that made my chest tighten. I needed answers, he said. And now I have them. You had no right. I started, my voice shaking. No right, he cut in, his tone still calm, but edged with something deeper now. Then tell me I am wrong. He stepped closer, just enough that I could not ignore the truth standing between us anymore. Tell me he is not my son. The world tilted. I could not breathe, could not think. Every lie I had built over the past 3 years crumbled in that single moment. My lips parted, but no words came out. Because there was nothing left to say. Ethan exhaled slowly, his gaze dropping for a brief second before returning to me, sharper, heavier, filled with something I had never seen before. Not anger, not disbelief, something worse. He is mine, he said, more to himself than to me. And just like that, the truth I had buried for so long was no longer mine to hide. I always thought the hardest part would be keeping the truth hidden, but I was wrong. The hardest part was standing there when it was finally exposed, and realizing I could not run anymore. My hands were trembling, even though I tried to keep them steady, even though Lewis was standing just a few feet away, completely unaware that his entire world had just shifted. Liam. Ethan said my name slowly, like he was testing it, like it carried a meaning he had not understood until now. I closed my eyes for a second, the sound of it breaking something inside me that I had spent years holding together. Do not say my name like that, I whispered. Like what? He asked, his voice softer now, but heavier too. Like it matters, I replied. Silence fell between us, thick and suffocating. I could feel his gaze on me, searching, waiting, demanding the truth I had already lost the right to hide. Say something, he pressed. I shook my head, taking a step back. What do you want me to say? My voice cracked despite my efforts. That you are right? That everything you just found out is real? Yes, he said immediately, his tone sharp with urgency. I want the truth. I let out a shaky breath, my chest rising and falling too fast, like I was trying to outrun something that had already caught me. Fine, I said quietly. You want the truth? I looked up at him, meeting his eyes fully for the first time since that night 3 years ago. Then listen carefully, because I am only going to say this once. He did not interrupt. He did not move. That night, the night of graduation, I began, my voice barely steady. You came to me, not the other way around. You talked to me like I was someone you actually saw, like I mattered for the first time. My throat tightened, but I forced myself to keep going. We were both overwhelmed, everything felt different. And for a moment, I thought it meant something to you too. Ethan's expression shifted slightly, something flickering in his eyes, but I could not stop now. The next morning, you looked at me like I was a stranger. I continued, my voice growing quieter. You did not remember anything. Not a single moment. He inhaled sharply, but I kept speaking before he could interrupt. And then I heard you were getting engaged. I added, the words tasting just as bitter as they had 3 years ago. So I left. Because what was I supposed to do? Stay and tell you that I was carrying your child when you could not even remember being with me. You should have told me, he said, his voice low, strained. I let out a hollow laugh, shaking my head. Told you what? That I was a mistake you forgot. The words hung in the air, heavier than anything else I had said. I was not going to beg you to take responsibility for something you did not even know happened. Ethan took a step closer, his expression tightening. That is not what this is, he said firmly. Then what is it? I shot back, my emotions finally breaking through the control I had held for so long. Because from where I stood, it looked pretty clear. He stopped, his jaw tightening, but there was no anger in his eyes. Only something deeper. Regret. That made it worse. I carried him alone. I continued, my voice shaking now. I left everything behind. I built a life from nothing. And I did it without you because I thought that was the only choice I had. My gaze dropped for a second before I forced myself to look at him again. So if you are waiting for me to apologize for not telling you, I will not. The silence that followed felt endless. Ethan exhaled slowly, running a hand through his hair like he was trying to process everything at once. Then he looked at me again, his voice quieter than I had ever heard it. I am not here for an apology, he said. My heart skipped. Then why are you here? I asked. He did not hesitate this time. Because I need to understand why I lost 3 years of my son's life, he said, his voice steady but heavy with something raw. And why you thought you had to carry all of this alone. I thought hearing his regret would make things easier, but instead it made everything hurt in a way I was not prepared for, because for the first time, I realized the past I had buried was not as one-sided as I believed. I stared at Ethan, my chest tight, my thoughts tangled between anger and something far more dangerous. Hope. You want to understand? I repeated quietly. Then maybe you should start with what you remember. He held my gaze, his expression shifting, like something deep inside him was finally breaking through. That is the problem, he said. I did not remember, not at first. My breath caught. What does that mean? I asked, my voice barely steady. He hesitated, then spoke slowly, carefully, like each word carried weight. For a long time, that night was just blank, he admitted. I knew I drank too much. I knew I left early, but everything in between was gone. My hands curled slightly at my sides. Exactly, I said. That is why I left. But it did not stay gone, he added, his voice lowering. I froze. What? He looked away briefly, like he was piecing it together again as he spoke. After you disappeared, things felt off, he said. I could not explain it. There were moments I felt like I was forgetting something important, something I should not have lost. My heart started pounding again. So I tried to ignore it, he continued. I told myself it did not matter. That if it was important, I would remember. He let out a quiet breath, his jaw tightening slightly. But then I started remembering pieces. I felt like the ground beneath me shifted. Pieces? I whispered. His eyes met mine again, more intense now, more certain. You, he said simply. My breath stopped. Your voice. The way you looked at me. The way I felt that night. His expression softened. Something vulnerable breaking through the composure he always carried. It did not make sense at first. I could not place it, but it kept coming back. I shook my head slightly, struggling to process what he was saying. If you remembered, then why did you not come after me? My voice cracked on the last word, betraying more than I wanted it to. Ethan's expression darkened, not with anger, but with something heavier. Because you were gone, he said quietly. You left without a word. No explanation. No way to find you. I swallowed hard. I thought you were engaged, I said, the old wound reopening instantly. I thought you chose someone else. His brows furrowed deeply. Engaged? He repeated, clearly confused. Yes, I insisted, my voice rising slightly. Everyone was talking about it. A family arrangement. I heard it myself. Ethan let out a short, disbelieving breath, running a hand through his hair again. That was never real, he said. I blinked. What? It was a business proposal, he explained, his tone firm now. Something my family wanted. I turned it down before it ever became official. My mind went completely blank. No, I whispered, shaking my head slowly. That is not possible. I heard. You heard rumors, he cut in gently, but with certainty. And you believed them without asking me. The words hit harder than I expected. Because he was right. I never asked. I never gave him the chance to explain. I took one step back, my thoughts spiraling. So you are telling me, I said slowly, my voice trembling, that all this time, I was looking for something I could not name, he finished quietly. And you were running from something that was not even real. Silence fell again, but this time it felt different. Not suffocating, just heavy with everything we had lost. I was going to tell you, he added suddenly, his voice softer now. Before that night, I was planning to. My eyes snapped back to him. Tell me what? He held my gaze, unwavering. That I liked you, he said simply. That I wanted more than just being friends. My heart clenched painfully. But you left, he continued. And I thought I thought I was too late. I felt my vision blur slightly, emotions I had buried for years rising all at once. So we both, I started, my voice breaking. Got it wrong, he finished. And just like that, everything we thought we knew about the past shattered into something completely different. I thought the story between us had ended 3 years ago, but standing there in front of him, I realized it had only been paused, waiting for the truth to finally catch up. My heart was still racing, my thoughts tangled in everything he had just said, everything I had believed that turned out to be wrong. So what now? I asked quietly, my voice no longer sharp, no longer defensive, just tired. Ethan did not hesitate. Now I stay, he said. I frowned slightly, unsure if I heard him correctly. Stay. Yes, he repeated, his gaze steady, grounded in a way that felt different from before. I am not losing another day. Not with him. Not with you. The words hit me harder than I expected. You cannot just decide that, I said, shaking my head. You cannot walk into our lives and act like nothing happened. I am not acting like nothing happened, he replied calmly. I am saying I am here now. And I am not leaving. I looked away, my chest tightening again. It is not that simple, I murmured. It never is. Then we figure it out, he said. One step at a time. I let out a quiet breath, unsure whether to feel relieved or overwhelmed. Before I could respond, a small voice interrupted us. Daddy. Louis came running toward me from the school entrance, his face lighting up the moment he saw us. He slowed when he noticed Ethan still standing there, his expression shifting into curiosity. You are still here, Louis said, tilting his head. Ethan crouched down slightly, bringing himself to Louis's level. Yeah, he said softly. I was waiting. Louis smiled, completely at ease. For me, he asked. Ethan glanced at me for a brief second before answering. For both of you. Something inside me shifted at that. Small, uncertain, but real. Louis stepped closer, studying him carefully. Are you going to come tomorrow too? He asked. I opened my mouth to answer, to set boundaries, to keep things under control. But Ethan spoke first. If it is okay with your dad, he said, his voice gentle but deliberate. Louis immediately looked at me, eyes wide with expectation. Kenny, he asked. I hesitated. Every instinct told me to say no, to protect what little stability we had left. But then I looked at Louis, at the way he was already reaching towards something he did not fully understand. And then I looked at Ethan, at the way he was not pushing, not forcing, just waiting. For once, not taking control, but asking for it. We will see, I said finally, my voice soft but firm. Louis grinned, satisfied with that answer. Okay, he said, grabbing my hand again. As we started walking away, Ethan stood there for a moment before calling out, Liam. I stopped, turning slightly. I meant what I said, he added, his voice steady. I am not going anywhere. I held his gaze for a second, searching for doubt, for hesitation. There was none, just certainty. It scared me more than anything else. But for the first time in a long time, it did not feel like something I had to run from. That night, after Louis fell asleep, I sat quietly by his bed, watching the slow rise and fall of his chest. My life had never been simple. It had been built on choices made out of fear, out of love, out of survival. But now, for the first time, I was being given a different kind of choice. Not to run, not to hide, but to stay. I reached out, brushing a strand of hair away from Louis's face, my chest tightening with something I could not quite name. Maybe we do not have to do this alone anymore, I whispered softly. And for the first time in 3 years, the future did not feel like something I had to face by myself.